Hey guys, this is Victor Simplified, and as you can see, there's only one of us today. Unfortunately, we're out of school right now, so we're on summer break, so Caleb and I can't get together to shoot videos, and we're sorry for the long amount of time that's taken just to get another video out. It's been pretty hectic with working around the farm and trying to be able to actually get a study in and get the next video out to you guys. Now, something that we're going to start changing up and do a little bit differently. We're not going to read the Bible to you anymore. It was brought up by one of our viewers and a friend of ours that it's like we're doing your job for you if we read the scripture to you. So we don't want to read the scripture to you anymore as far as reading the whole context of the scripture. It's too long and it gets boring. You guys are probably zoning out by the time we get done. And plus, that's us doing your job for you. So we want you guys to go ahead and get in the scripture. You guys take charge and dive down into Genesis, where we're at right now, and just really look into things and see for yourself what's there. And then we'll still do our best to try to explain things to you, bring some facts, some history, all of those things to you, and try to give you our opinions as well. Okay, so starting off, we want to go to Genesis chapter 5, and we want to talk about the genealogy in chapter 5. So if you go on and you read from the family of Adam, all the way from Adam to Noah, then you'll notice something that's actually pretty interesting. Now, if you look at all of these, and of course, you might think, oh, genealogies are so boring, I hate reading genealogies. Well, take a look at it this way. This genealogy was put in here well before Jesus ever came down, right? And so just take a look at what the names mean. If you look at Adam, that's Hebrew, and then the English means man. And then Seth, his son, means appointed. Enosh means mortal. Canaan means sorrow. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared means shall come down. Enoch means teaching. Methuselah means his death shall bring. Lamech means the despairing. And Noah means rest or comfort. So the names really mean something here, much more beyond just, hey, my son's name is Enosh. No, Enosh meant mortal. Canaan meant sorrow. They all meant something. And you see representation of each of their names in their lives, which is very interesting. Let's take all of what we just said, put it all together, and I'm going to add in just a couple joining words. It says, man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching that his death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort. That is just crazy awesome. The blessed God shall come down teaching. These are the names of the first 10 generations on the planet. And in the very beginning, it's already ordained that Christ will come down and bring all the despairing rest and comfort. So just amazing looking at that. And how remarkable it is that even in the very beginning, the first 10 generations, God already had a plan to take care of the sin in our life. And you can check out in the khouse.org link down below to see that for yourself in a visual representation. We want to go ahead and get into Lamech. Noah's dad is who Lamech is. He would have been about 56 at the time of Adam's death, according to the timetable laid out in Genesis 5. Let's dive down into the timetable that we're seeing in Genesis 5. When we look at these, we say, okay, the scripture says 56, and you're doing some math there, and you're trying to figure everything out. Keep in mind that we have a calendar that is much different than the calendar that was used in scripture in Genesis. See, the scripture in Genesis is before the post-exilic Jewish calendar, so that Jewish calendar is after the exiles of the Israelites. If that's before, that says that Genesis has to predate the exile as far as the way it was written and the calendar in and of itself. The calendar is before, and then in Scripture we see in Genesis 7 and 8 we talk about the flood and the ark ride. And the way that this is kind of calculated is that we see 30 days per month for 12 months. Is what we kind of see in Genesis 7 and Genesis 8. In Genesis 7 and 8, we see the 17th day of the second month to the 17th day of the seventh month was a day count of 150 days. That is saying that 150 days is 5 months of 30 days, which means that all 12 months should have 30 days according to that calendar, which predates ours. So I tried to do some math here and said that Adam died at 930 years according to that calendar, according to 12 months of 30 days. Now, if we throw in our current calendar, now go ahead and double check me on this, do the math yourself. I got that Adam probably lived around 916 years. So go ahead and do the math yourself, double check me on that, and see for yourself what you think about that. That covers up Genesis 5 and the things that we can kind of glean from that a little bit. And then we get into Genesis 6. This opens up a whole new can of worms. Genesis 6 is widely debated by many people for just the first couple of verses. So read that, and then we'll get into that. Go ahead and pause the video, read it, and then come back. Right at the beginning of Genesis 6, we see the sons of God. Okay? Who are the sons of God? That's a question that we really get a lot of debate on, like I was just saying. There's a lot of theories out there, there's thoughts, and there seems to be really 4 main theories that comes from biblical scholars as to what the sons of God are. Okay, so you've got, number 1, fallen angels. Basically, this view is that Satan and his fallen angels have bred with human women and had offspring that were called Nephilim. So the Nephilim are what you see in Genesis 6. You're also going to hear the Nephilim in Numbers 13, verses 30 through 33, they talk about them. There's a brief description of what could be the Nephilim in Jude. So there's lots of different things here to take into consideration when talking about the Nephilim. Okay, so that's the first view. Now, the first view's got some things that kind of point it in one direction, kind of take it away in another. And so the first thing you look at is Genesis 18 and 19. They talk about the angels coming to Sodom and Gomorrah, and the angels were sent there basically to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah in the end. But the men were trying to have sexual relations with them as the angels were going into the man's house. So the men are trying to have sexual relations with them, so we see that that could be an instance where fallen angels came and they would breed with the women to say that it is possible. As well as in Hebrews 13, it talks about some people have entertained angels and they didn't even know it. It doesn't imply sexually entertaining, but the entertaining means basically they have corresponded with an angel and they didn't even know it because the angel looked just like them. At that point, we kind of see, all right, maybe then the angels can have the appearance of man and the fallen angels could then have sexual relations with a woman. You know, that's one theory. Now, let's go to Numbers 13, 30 through 33, and we'll talk about what that is. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are of great stature. There we saw the giants. The descendants of Anak came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." So that gives a description of the Nephilim. Of course, Numbers is after the flood in Genesis 7 and 8. If it's after the flood, it's got to be a totally different line. So we'll talk a little bit more about that with the other 3 theories. But a problem with the first theory is this. Do angels have DNA? That is a question that we can't really get an answer for. In Matthew 22, 23 through 33, you'll read a little bit about the discussion between Jesus and the Sadducees of what's going to happen when a man gets to heaven and a woman gets to heaven. Now, what is the marriage relationship? And there's a moment in verse 30 where Jesus says that the relationships between man and woman won't be like they are on earth as they are right now. Instead, that we will be like the angels. So the angels, that means, don't have intermarital relations, so that won't be an issue. That makes you wonder, if do angels actually have DNA? You know, you have to think about that. Could they spread their DNA and inseminate a woman, and that woman then get pregnant and be able to have a child? Well, we're not sure. And it's not like we can just, Google, do angels have DNA? If you do that, you're going to come up with lots of different things, and there's lots of different theories on that as well. So you might give that a look. Now, our second theory, it's the fallen angels overtake men. What that basically is demon possession, or what has been known as indwelling. So a demon or a fallen angel will come and take over your body as a human, and then as you being the host, you have sexual relations with a woman, and then your offspring would be the Nephilim. That's kind of the idea there. So that could be the fallen angels, or it could also be Satan possessing the men to breed with the women. If you do that, you got the problem with the DNA there going into the woman. That's still man. So you've got a really big problem trying to figure that out. If the demonic forces are indwelling inside of you, and then you have sexual relations with a woman, the DNA is still yours. Would we still get the Nephilim from that? Well, there's another thing to consider here. If the DNA is still man's, then can it at all change the construct of the human being that is born because of it? Maybe, maybe not. But here's the thing. We see all the time different places where supernatural forces affect the physical in a very major way. For instance, a lot of people in the secular world say that if you're sad or depressed, let's say you have depression, well, some people in the Christian circles will say that's a spirit of depression. So a demonic force is causing depression upon you. And so you go back to the secular people, they say that if you have depression, it will legitimately start to ruin your body. It will corrupt your body and make you sick and make you unhealthy. Not just in your mind or in your heart, but your whole body will physically become healthy because you are struggling with this depression. So, pointing back to the Christian circles who say it's a spirit of depression, demonic influences are breaking down the physical parts of your body in the end of that. Maybe there is a possibility that supernatural forces indwelling within you can change the DNA as you are having sexual relations with a woman, or at least the people in Genesis 6 here. So then we have the third view, and that's the Sethite view. Basically it says that the sons of gods were the godly line from Adam to Seth, all the way down to Noah, and the Nephilim were fallen children who sought after false gods. This is kind of interesting. Basically, it could also be that Seth's line is intermarried with Canaan's line, so there's a couple different viewpoints just in this main theory here. If that was the case, then Seth's line would have been majorly spread out instead of consolidated, kind of how we see in Scripture. But it would have been majorly spread out because the Anakites, we were just talking about in Numbers 13, 30 through 33, the Anakites were descendants of giants. Goliath was a descendant of the Nephilim. So if he's the descendant of the Nephilim, then there has to be much more to the story than just Seth's line. So this theory kind of gets a bad rap just because Seth's line would have been more spread out instead of so consolidated, because you see all the other people involved in that story. The fourth theory is similar, and it is the ungodly men intermarrying with ungodly women. Okay, so basically what you see is people who could have been once part of a line that was godly, maybe Seth's line, or maybe just people in general who were ungodly, then took ungodly wives, and their descendants followed after false gods, rejected God, and fell far from God in wickedness, causing them to no longer be sons of God, because they're no longer godly men, they're now very wicked in their hearts. So these would be the Nephilim, but the problem with this theory is, how does that create a giant? How does wickedness in and of itself create a giant just between a man and a woman? How does that turn into the giant DNA? So that kind of puts a little bit of a damper on that. Now, what I would just recommend you to do is just do an in-depth study. Take everything I've said into consideration and really dive into it. It actually gets pretty interesting. There is an entire series that is just all about aliens and Nephilim and things of that kind of sort. You can really just find some interesting topics of study to do on the Nephilim and giants and aliens and things of that nature. So really just dive into that, and I'm sure that you'll come back pretty interested in those things. We also see more accounts of the Nephilim in the book of Jasher and the book of Enoch, and accounts described by Josephus. These are all typically thought to be his historical references, and they have some references in Scripture that include them. They were never listed as Scripture, but they are found as pretty accurate as far as the secular world would describe history, and they have a lot of things that really correspond to Scripture and what they say. So there's references to those, and then there's a lot of other evidence. Things all over the world have been found, fossils that were really large, things that just don't seem right with human skeletons, hominoids that are 15 feet tall and things of that nature. So, that could be a lot of evidence there. Some of those things, a lot of them actually, have been debunked as being skeletons of different animals or different things, and so they don't really fit. There has been some evidence found, some large skulls from a gravesite that had DNA inside of them that did not belong to humans, primates, or animal species. So that's really interesting, that there was evidence of DNA in a skull and it doesn't belong to humans, primates, or any other animal species. So the jury's still out on that. They can't figure out what the DNA is, and therefore they wonder if maybe that DNA is fallen angel, demonic DNA, to go back to the sons of God. That I think that in the coming years we'll find more and more pieces of information that kind of fit towards this. And you can check out the 6000years.org, the answersingenesis.org, the gotquestions.org, and the blumhouse.com links down below to just get a whole lot more information, some pictures of things, some more explanations. Going back into Genesis 6, let's go to verse 3. At this time, God says, "My spirit will no longer strive with man." So we're going to cut down the years. And instead of living to be 969 years like Methuselah, it's going to be brought down to 120. Keep in mind that those people that when God said that were already on the earth, they're still on the earth. That doesn't mean they're just going to die because they're older than 120. They're still going to live out their years. But what we see now is a dramatic decrease in lifespan from here on out. From this point forward, each person's life that you hear about basically gets shorter and shorter and shorter, with the exception of just a couple people who a little bit longer than their ancestors, but still that's decreasing. You can see that it's decreasing. And so this gives us an explanation of why in today's world we don't see people getting over 120 years old, though it was common at that time to be 969 or 700 or all of this. So this also gives us more evidence to the idea that the older patriarchs like Methuselah actually were 969 or 750 or any ages like that. That they actually got to be that age, and because they were that age, as based on the calendar year that we talked about in Genesis 5, that because they were that age, there was a significant decrease. Keep in mind that whenever the flood happens, we see some major changes to the environment and the atmosphere that just can really do some damage to the lifespan. So we'll talk about that later when we get into Genesis 7 and 8. Verses 4 through 8, we're talking about the wickedness of man. And the wickedness is just totally getting out of hand. In Matthew 24, we see Jesus say, like in the days of Noah, that's when we will notice the Son of Man returning. And we're getting into that so quickly. And God felt sorrow for making a creature that would become so vile. He was going to basically wipe out man, woman, and child, beast of the field, birds of the air. He's going to take out everything. And then Noah was able to find grace in the eyes of the Lord. Is God evil? No. Can he create something that's evil? No. But he can create something and give it free will, and then because of free will, that species that he created would decide for themselves to become evil. And that's what happened when we took of the fruit in the beginning of Genesis, and then from then on our species was greatly diminished because we let sin into our lives and continued to let it go throughout. So Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and was able to save him and his family and his sons and his sons' wives and their families. And So that he gets them all on the ark. But before he gets on the ark, he has to build the ark. So Noah starts to build the ark in verses 13 through 22. And it says that animals of every kind shall be a pair of two. But if you look down in chapter 7, verses 2 through 3, we see 7 pairs each of clean animals and birds, and only 2 of unclean. It wasn't just a pair of 2 that went into the ark of every animal. You don't, kind of like in all those old school Sunday school posters, you see animals 2 by 2, 2 giraffes, 2 elephants, 2 donkeys, whatever. Well, that's not the case. It's 7 pairs of 2 of each of the clean animals and the birds, and then 2 of the unclean animals. Unclean being the animals that were forbidden, such as swine would be, for instance. Just things that we'll find out later in Leviticus, things that were forbidden to eat. What is the size of the ark? We read that in Genesis 6 down at the bottom here. We see its size given in verse 15, and it says the length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. So this boils down to a cubit is about 1.5 feet in our current scale. Basically what that says is you've got an ark that is 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall. It also says that there are 3 decks. This gives it a square footage of 101,000 square feet. NFL rules say that a football field, according to standards, should be 57,600 square feet. So that gives you kind of an idea of how big 3 decks on this ark would be. And it's going to be twice the size, almost, of a football field's square footage. Now, the animals, we don't know how many species of animals there are, because, of course, we weren't there at the time. We can't see that. But I would venture to say that there was less species than what we have now, because we've had another 2,000 years since Jesus, to even get more and more adaptations of species. So a lot of times you'll see inbreeding of dogs. So if you can have a Pomeranian and a Husky, and then you get a Pomsky. So that's one example. So we've done a lot of inbreeding as we've gotten more research done into the species of animals, more crossbreeding, I should say. Because of that, we see even more and more and more species pop up. Well, Noah probably didn't have to worry about all that. He also didn't have to worry about bringing the animals, because God brought the animals to him so that he could save them. So this is how God plans on getting rid of the violent. Another thing that you see in the description is, where is the window of the ark? The door is in the side to get in and out, and then it's sealed. God sealed the door himself. Now, but what about the window? The window is not in the side of the ark. No, the window is at the top of the ark. Even with all of the rain and everything, all of the flood waters coming up and really messing with it, where did Noah have to look? He had to look towards the sky. Now, does this mean that the window was facing up, flat, with the top of the boat? Probably not, or else the rain would get in and just soak everything. It's at the top of the boat. Every time that Noah looked out that window to see fresh air, he had to look up towards God. And he had to, in the midst of the storm, look to God. Noah's name, what does it mean? Comfort and rest. He had to get his comfort and he had to get his rest from looking at God in the midst of the storm. So the question becomes this: are you going to look into the very presence of God? Are you going to look to the heavens for your answers when you're in the midst of the storm? I would hope so. This concludes Genesis 5 and 6. Do your own research. Get out there and just check up on everything we've said. Let us know if there's anything that you just, that doesn't seem to add up. Let us know so we can fix our own issues, whether it's a math mistake, whether it's we're using some sources that are totally one-sided. Well, let us know what you think. And give us a like or a share, and let all your friends know, and just bring everybody in that you can, so that we can just begin to expand out and more people can hear about the victory that is found in Scripture, and they can have it simplified for them. But like I said, this is not just about me reading it to you. It's not just about me doing the work for you. You got to get out there. You got to do it yourself. So this is Victory Simplified. My name is Joseph. Caleb will be back shortly, and we'll talk to you later.